Happiness lies not in conflict, but in resolution. The Bhagavad Gita, a sacred Hindu text about 2,500 years old, and more often than not, treated as a manual on how to live a purposeful, ethical, and peaceful life, though set on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, is ultimately a discourse on inner harmony, righteous action, and balance. At its heart, the Gita encourages self awareness, detachment from ego, and the pursuit of dharma, that is, duty, through wisdom and compassion, all of which align deeply with the principles of mediation. Where litigation often stems from ego, blame, and adversarial positions, mediation invites introspection, dialogue, and shared responsibility. Like Arjun on the battlefield, parties in conflict often face internal dilemmas. The mediator, like Krishna, facilitates clarity not by taking sides, but by guiding parties towards understanding and resolution. Namaskar and a very good evening to all of you. On behalf of Nivaran, mediators of the Supreme Court of India, in collaboration with the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, CLA, and the Singapore International Mediation Center, SIMC, I am delighted to welcome you all to day 6 of the 6th International Virtual Mediation Summer School 2025. A very warm welcome to our esteemed guest faculty and to all our participants from across the globe who have joined us on this 10-day journey for mediators, legal professionals, and students from around the world to engage in learning, dialogue, and exchange on various aspects of mediation. I'm Asta Sharma, mediator and advocate on record, Supreme Court of India, and a partner at Aquilaw. More importantly, your host for the day. Today, we are honored to have with us Mr. A.J. Jawad, a distinguished senior mediator and trainer, and a pioneer in the field of mediation, who also dons the hat of the Registrar and CEO of the International Arbitration and Mediation Center, IAMC Hyderabad. Sir has, since 2007, mediated hundreds of cases covering a wide range of disputes ranging from civil, commercial to family, matrimonial, custody matters under the Tamil Nadu Mediation and Conciliation Center, High Court of Madras, and the Mediation and Conciliation Project Committee, Supreme Court of India. Sir has also been instrumental in imparting mediation training programs after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. As the global faculty of ADR ODR International, Mr. Jawad has conducted training programs in several universities in India and the United Kingdom. As a specialist guest faculty, he has taught a paper on basic mediation for the candidates undergoing the postgraduate course in mediation conducted by the Maharashtra National Law University. Additionally, Sir is also on the panel of the Singapore International Mediation Center as an India specialist mediator. Mr. Jawad will today be speaking on a critical and highly relevant topic, impasse in mediation and the way out. An impasse is often seen as a deadlock or a breaking point in mediation. However, I recently came across a perspective that the deadlock in mediation is rarely about the issue, but more about what lies beneath it. Behind every impasse is an unmet need, and mediation is the art of uncovering it. Our guest faculty today will delve deep into the facets of impasse and how sometimes stepping back is the only way forward, and that with the right approach, even a seemingly intractable situation can offer creative opportunities for resolution. His insights will certainly deepen our understanding of how mediators can skillfully navigate such moments to help parties move forward. After the session, which would be for about 30 flexible minutes, we will have a 20-minute question and answer segment. I invite all participants to type their questions in the chat box during the lecture. Your questions will be instrumental in shaping the discussion and gaining deeper insights from our guest speaker. With that, let me now hand over the floor to Mr. Jawad. We look forward to learning from your experience and expertise, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Asta. Thank you, Nivaran and CLA for giving me this opportunity. I see a lot of very distinguished people on the screen, including Brian Spears, Mr. Rajiv Datta, Mr. Jitendra Sharma, and various other people, and also some very familiar faces like Manoj Mathur, Mr. Ravi Kapoor, uh, Vidhi, and so many others. So, hello to all of you, and thank you for being here today. And one thing I can promise you at the very inception is this topic is going to be very boring. So please be prepared for that. Okay. No promises held of that it is going to be interesting, but let's see how we can proceed further. Okay. Uh, Now, what is an impasse when you actually talk about an impasse? Okay, mediation is all about impasse, right? So parties, whether they want to go for mediation or not, is a very important decision for the parties to take. And many times in a conflict situation, the very thought of sitting opposite the other party and negotiating itself can be a very intimidating thought, or something that parties may not be really inclined to think about. So that is, I think, the first stage of impasse that comes, because whether to go for mediation or not to go for mediation. Now, many times, it helps because this is where the convening part of the mediation, where parties, uh, uh, at least one party will definitely be in favor of mediation. They may feel that, okay, let's go for mediation and let's see whether we can find a solution. And then they approach a mediator, and then the responsibility of the mediator is to reach out to the other party and perhaps face some resistance from the other party, because the other party may not see any value in it. Cost might be an additional concern, because many times people ask me this question, that why should we incur the additional cost for going into mediation? Because when we don't know that we may or may not settle, we don't know whether what is the outcome going to be? Are we going to be able to reach a resolution? We don't know that. So why should we even incur that extra cost? So these are all, these are all the thought processes that go on in the minds of people who are in a conflict situation, because conflict itself uh, can be a very destabilizing influence in their lives. So one of the first challenges that a mediator faces is, how do you get the parties to the mediation table? That is the first challenge. So if either one of the parties comes or both the parties come, how do you get them to really believe in the process? How do you get them to a place where they are willing to discuss with you what their concerns are? They're willing to listen to what you have to say. Because a lot of a mediator's role involves asking some difficult questions to the parties to help them to shift their perspective. So that is the first challenge that a mediator faces at the very beginning of the mediation process. Okay, so starting from there, what we are going to be talking about is more about the impasse that comes in during the process of mediation. Uh, where do we meet those roadblocks? Okay, so where do we really face those challenges in where the parties get stuck? They're not able to move further in the discussion. So what could be the various factors that contribute to this kind of an impasse? And perhaps have a look at some of the techniques or strategies that a mediator can use to break that impasse. Okay, so that's what we are going to be discussing today. So I'll just go to, I have prepared a small PowerPoint presentation for this, and please let me know if you can see my screen. Yes, you can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So obviously the topic is impasse in mediation. So what is an impasse? Basically, it's a deadlock. People reach a deadlock, or there is a stalemate, or there's some barrier that is stopping people from moving forward in the discussion. Okay. Now, why does this impasse occur? There might be various reasons for that. And, I have just put up a picture here. So you can put on the chat box. How many of you are able to see a young girl over here? I'm just opening the chat to see. How many of you are able to see a young girl here? Okay. Okay. Somebody said young girl and old face too, or an old woman also. Okay. Now, how many of you are able to see the old lady also? Okay. How many of you are not able to see the old lady or not able to see the young girl? Not able to see the old lady. Yes. See both. Okay, so I think almost there is a 50-50 divide between those who can see the old lady or see the young girl or see both. So some of you are not able to see both over here. Now, this is this is the biggest challenge in a conflict situation because each one of us has a different perspective of the problem. So I'm sure many of you would have heard the story of the six blind, visually challenged persons. The story, when I read it in school, when it was there was no such thing as political correctness, it was called as the six blind men of Hindustan. So the disability part as well as the gender part is something that was not very important in those days, but today that is very important. So we have a mixed group of people over here who are visually challenged, and each one sees the elephant from a particular perspective. So one touches the tail of the elephant and says it's a rope. One touches the body and says it's a wall. One touches the legs and says it's a tree. One touches the trunk and says it's a snake. The ear is touched by one and thinks that it is a fan, and somebody thinks it's a spear, looking at feeling the tusk. Now, this is a situation that you normally find in conflicts because people are looking at things from their particular perspective and they're not able to see the whole picture. And one of the most significant roles that a mediator plays in a mediation is to help them to look at the full picture. So if supposing a person who has vision of both the eyes is present here, that person would perhaps help them to understand that each one of them is right, but there is a much bigger picture to be seen over there. So, and the problem is our brain receives 11 million bits of information every second. And it's able to process only about 40 bits of information. And this is what leads us to, this is what restricts our ability to see the whole picture in a conflict situation. And this is what even parties in a conflict, when they are in the mediation process, are encountering. This is the biggest problem that they face, right? Now, when can there be an impasse? As I said, even before the beginning of the mediation, there can be an impasse because whether to go for mediation or not to go for mediation, that can be one challenge. Whom to choose as a mediator can be another challenge, right? So how should the cost be split can be another challenge. So these are all before parties enter into the mediation. Now, when you enter into the mediation, many times people agree that, okay, let's go for the mediation. But when they come for the mediation, especially in the context where mediation is mandated, for example, under the court referred mediation programs, sometimes parties are not even asked whether they would like to go for mediation. So they walk into the mediation room and they simply tell the mediator, I'm sorry that we are not interested in this. We don't know why we've been sent here. Please send us back. Now, one of the things that I always do when this happens in the beginning is that I tell them that, why don't you sit down? And let me explain to you what this is all about. And then you can decide whether you want to walk away from this process or not. And then I explain to them the mediation process, okay, and tell them what are the advantages of it. And the fact that they are in a seat of power. Now, this can be a very powerful statement for parties because when you tell them that they are in a seat of power where they can take decisions and they can decide how to resolve the problem, and if they walk away from that seat of power, they're going to be losing that power. Okay, so they will be handing over the power to a third person, maybe a judge, maybe an arbitrator. Now, that can be very motivating for the parties to go into the mediation. Usually we start the mediation process in a joint session because the mediator makes the opening statement, explains the process to the parties. Now, my belief is that the opening statement is one of the first steps that a mediator takes to make sure that there is no impasse in the future as the process continues. Because what happens when the parties are coming for the mediation, there is something called SCARF. Okay, these are basically David Rock came up with the concept of 5 different domains, social domains, which can be violated, leading to parties, getting into the conflict situation. For example, something like status. Parties may feel that their status has been violated and they have been disrespected. So that would be one perspective of the parties why they come for mediation, why they are in the conflict situation. The second might be a sense of loss of certainty, an uncertainty about where they stand as far as the conflict is concerned, or what is going to happen in the future, and where the relationship itself stands. So the uncertainty of it might be something that triggers the party's agitation or state of mind, which is full of emotions, anger, sadness, frustration, disgust. All these emotions might be playing a very significant role because there is an element of uncertainty. Then there might be the question of autonomy because they feel powerless, because they feel that, okay, we have no power to resolve this. Okay, it's not in our control. It's dependent on somebody else to come to a resolution. So that sense of loss of autonomy is there on the parties. The relatedness is affected because they are in conflict. They feel disconnected from each other. So no matter how close the relationship might be between them, they might be friends, they might be partners, they might be couples, married to each other. They might be siblings who are fighting over some division of property or whatever. But what happens is that sense of relatedness is deeply affected, and that is the reason why they are in conflict, because they feel disconnected with each other. They feel alienated from each other. And there's always, when you're in conflict, there's a feeling that, I have been wronged and I'm the victim. So people always suffer from that victimhood complex when they are in a conflict state. And the surprising thing is both feel that they are the victims. So when you make an opening statement, the mediator's opening statement, actually the way the whole opening statement is designed or structured, is designed in such a way that it addresses these concerns of the parties. So for example, when you say that the process is voluntary, you're giving them the autonomy, the power to walk away from there. And when you're telling them that they are going to be deciding how to resolve it, you're respecting their status and you're giving them the power to find solutions for themselves. You're otherwise saying that you have the power to do this by yourself. So you're respecting their status, you're respecting their autonomy, and you're giving them an element of certainty by explaining to them what your role as a mediator is, as a neutral party who's not going to be who doesn't have any stake in the issue that is there for mediation or in the conflict itself or with either of the parties. And the fact that you assure them that it is a without prejudice process, okay, and the confidentiality part of it. So when you explain to them the confidentiality and the without prejudice nature of the process, they get the certainty element is addressed because now they know that this process is not going to hurt them, it's going to help them. So that is one thing that you do as a mediator. And then you lay down the ground rules. The two simple ground rules that you lay down in a mediation, that when one person speaks, the other should not interrupt. And the fact that the conversation should be polite and civilized. So you're creating a safe ground for them. Okay, so you're creating that sense of relatedness. And when you say that we are going to work as a team and we are all on the same side and we are trying to see how the problem can be resolved. Okay, so we have a problem and we have to work together to find a solution for the problem. So this is one of the first things that the mediator does. The very opening statement itself is a very powerful technique to break any potential impasse and to create that sense of team, the spirit of working together as a team to find a solution to the problem. So now sometimes what happens, in spite of all the best efforts of the mediator in making a very effective opening statement, the conflict will be something that might go a long way back, and there might be the conflict might be so intense that many times in the very first joint session, you may have a problem dealing with the parties. I encountered one such situation where I was dealing with the matter where it was, though it was an online mediation, and it was between a couple, and one was based in Delhi, the other was based somewhere else. But the feelings were so strong among the parties that they could not have a decent conversation at all. It was somehow becoming very emotional, and a lot of expletives were being thrown around. So sometimes you have to break that by simply saying that, look, it seems to be difficult for us to have a conversation now. So let's defer it for some time, and then perhaps I would like to meet each one of you separately. So it can happen in a joint session, okay? It can happen in a private session or the what is called as the caucus. It can happen at the time of arriving at a settlement. And this is one of the most difficult parts because you've gone through the whole process, you've put in so much of effort, there have been so many discussions, everything is discussed threadbare, and you have come to a conclusion. And all of a sudden, one of the parties might, for example, say that, oh, I want that other guy to tell me sorry, say sorry to me. Okay, and you're stuck because the other guy says sorry. Why should I say sorry? I thought we had discussed all this. So I'm just giving you an example to say that even at the time of a settlement, on some, very minuscule issue, sometimes parties get stuck. So an impasse can arise in a mediation at any stage. So as a mediator, you have to be prepared that, okay, this can happen. Never feel that, oh, I have gone through this process and now we are on the verge of reaching a settlement and it's all hunky dory and, parties have agreed to this. Never be under that impression because at any point of time, something can happen. And you have to be very careful about many things because, there was one mediation where what happened was the mediation. So we were talking about basically what are the stages at which the impasse can arise, right? So it can be at the time of the opening, it can be at the time of the joint session, it can be at the time of the private session, and it can be at the time of even arriving at a settlement. Now, what could be the possible barriers to that prevent parties from entering into the negotiation or proceeding with the negotiation? Can anyone just guess? Oh, I'll do one thing. I'll just cut short the discussion and keep the thing open. I'll just continue with my talk, and then we can reserve the questions for the end. Okay. So when you talk about the barriers, we are talking about generally four kinds of barriers that can come up. There may be others also, but basically, broadly speaking, the first one is the cultural barrier. Because culture can play a very significant role in terms of how parties communicate with each other, how they look at the situation. And there has been a lot of research that has been done on this in the 60s and 70s by, I don't know how the name is pronounced, it's Geert Hofstede. So he has come up with six, cultural dimensions. In fact, he has classified the entire, all the different countries of the world into six different categories based on their approach to how they approach negotiation, how they deal with issues that come up. I'll go into that into more detail. A second is the cognitive barriers. These are basically the psychological barriers that come in the way of parties finding a negotiated settlement of the conflict. The third is the emotional barriers, because basically, as human beings, we are all victims of our emotions. And many times, even in a commercial contract, even in a dispute that is purely commercial in nature, there are a lot of emotions that are involved. We'll discuss that. And there are strategic barriers also, because parties resort to so many strategies in order to show that they're in a seat of power, or they want to, show the other person that, okay, we are very powerful and we really don't want this settlement. We are doing you a favor. So these can be strategic barriers. So let's go through that one by one. First, the cultural barriers. Now, according to Hofstede's findings, there are six different dimensions. The first is the power distance index, which is basically how the hierarchies work. The second is collectivism versus individualism. The third is uncertainty avoidance index. The fourth is restraint versus indulgence. Uh, the fifth is femininity versus masculinity. And the sixth is short term versus long term orientation. I'll quickly explain to you how this works basically. Okay. So when you talk about the power distance index, usually a high power distance index, you can Google this Hofstede's, cultural dimensions, and you'll get the world map that shows the different, cultures that work in the world. So a high power distance index usually indicates a culture that accepts inequity and power differences. It encourages bureaucracy, and there's a high respect for rank and authority. So it's a very hierarchical society. So on the contrary, a low power index indicates that a culture encourages flat, organizational structures. Uh, there is a decentralized decision-making responsibility, participative management style, and there is more emphasis on the power distribution. Uh, Many times in the Indian context, if you look at the Indian context, we are a high context hierarchical society. And many times, even in commercial mediations, we find that somebody represents an organization or a company and will have the necessary written authorization, which says that you have the power, you have the authorization to take part in the negotiation or the mediation process and to agree upon any terms. All this will be written in the document, but when it comes to actually signing the final settlement agreement, somebody might just tell you that, look, I have to get back to my chairman and managing director and get his or her consent. So this is the kind of hierarchy, and then the whole thing comes to a stop. And because the particular person who's in charge, who's the top honcho, who's the decision-making authority, has not been involved in the mediation, they don't understand what has gone into the whole process that has gone into or led to the stage of reaching an agreement. They don't understand that, and many times the whole proposal is shot down. So you have to be very careful when you're operating in a hierarchical society, when you're mediating. You have to make sure that the person who's really responsible for taking decisions is either there, or whatever settlement that is being reached has the sanction of that particular person. Okay. The second is individualism versus collectivism, where in individualistic societies, the emphasis lies more on personal achievement, rights, prioritizing the needs of oneself and one's immediate family. But in collectivism, it indicates that there is a greater importance placed on the goals and well being of the group. So the self image is defined as we, not I. And usually people from collectivist backgrounds often, they prioritize the relationships and loyalty. So in many of the Eastern cultures, you will find that it is more of a collectivist society. And because it is a high context society, it is also hierarchical. So the next is the uncertainty avoidance index, which means basically, is it a risk taking culture? Are the people inclined to take risk? So a high uncertainty avoidance index indicates a low tolerance for any kind of uncertainty, ambiguity, and risk taking. So what you usually do is you minimize the unknown or the uncertain parts with strict rules and regulations. And both the institutions and the individuals strive to reduce the uncertainty by employing some vigorous rules, regulations, and similar other measures. Low uncertainty avoidance index usually indicates a high tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity. So people are willing to face the unknown. The rules are more lax. The regulations are virtually absent. And usually individuals and cultures with low uncertainty avoidance are at ease in situations which lack structure or in fluctuating environments. Okay, now you can assess, for example, if you take the Indian culture, is it a low uncertainty avoidance or a high uncertainty avoidance? Can can you just put it on the chat quickly as to whether you identify the Indian culture as high uncertainty avoidance or low uncertainty avoidance? Asta, you'll have to tell me how many people feel that it is high uncertainty avoidance.
Sir, we just have 2 people so far who said low. Otherwise, there are about 7 of them. More lows coming in, sir.
Okay, more laws are coming in. Okay, okay. Because the fact is that we don't believe in rules and regulations. In fact, I was mediating a dispute between a US company and an Indian company. They had entered into a joint venture. And as usual, the Americans have, very clear-cut rules and regulations. They would have anticipated every eventuality and they would have provided for that. And they follow the rules very strictly. But in India, it doesn't happen that way. Okay, so we are more, we are very lax when it comes to implementation of rules and regulations. Now, this dispute arose, and as the mediation was going on, I realized that, actually the American company was accusing the Indians of cheating, breach of trust, blah, blah, blah. And there are so many proceedings pending in various tribunals and courts. But what actually happened as the mediation progressed, we realized that there was no actually any kind of a misdoing that was done by the Indian company, but simply that they had just not followed the rules. So I was having a private session with the CEO of the American company, and I asked him, have you heard of the concept of Jugad? Okay, so he said, no, what is Jugad? I said, well, that's a very Indian kind of a thing. And, we are very creative and innovative when it comes to finding solutions. So we don't follow rules and regulations, but we go, we play by the minute. Like anything develops, we find a solution to that. So we don't really focus on following any rules and regulations, but it's simply about finding solutions as and when the problem arises. So he said, no, I told him that like you have to take a call now. Can you work in this sort of a culture, or what do you think will be the way forward? He said, sorry, we can't work like that. Our culture is different. So you can see how the culture can, give rise to the conflict. And when we actually went through the accounts, they decided to dissolve the joint venture. And when they went through the accounts, they found that there was no manipulation, there was no misappropriation, nothing was there. It was just that the rules were not followed. So you can imagine how important this becomes in the mediation. Now, the other one is masculinity versus femininity. And, this is often referred to as the gender role differentiation. Masculinity includes the characteristics like distinct gender roles, an appreciation of assertiveness, courage, strength, and competition. Femininity includes characteristics like very fluid gender roles, modest, nurturing environment, and a concern with the quality of life. Now, once again, I would just request people to score India where they would place India as a masculine culture or a feminine culture. What are the responses, Asta?
So while most men have said masculine, sir, the women have said feminine, if I may.
Feminine, okay.
There are some
Okay.
50-50 as well.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry I'm asking the Indian participants to score here because the majority of the people here are Indians, that's why. But it's not to say that other cultures, have their own priorities, okay? Now,
So one very interesting comment which says feminine in terms of culture, but masculine in terms of practice.
oh, okay, okay, okay. Okay, that's something that needs a much longer debate, I think, but let's leave it at that. It's just the opinion of the people. Okay. Now, the other point is, indulgence versus restraint, the last one. So, the tendency for a society to fulfill its desires. Okay. So, indulgence usually indicates that society allows relatively free gratification. So, it's enjoying life and having fun. Whereas restraint is a society that suppresses gratification of needs and regulates it through a lot of social norms. Now, here again, where do we score India? Is it indulgence or is it restraint?
A lot of restraints coming in right from the start.
Okay. So I think I'm also inclined to agree with that. But what is the advantage of having a clear understanding of this Hofstede's cultural dimensions is that especially when you're doing cross-cultural mediation. Now, one of the unique things about India is that it is said in India that every 200 kilometers, the culture changes because it's a huge country. It's a mosaic of various cultures, various languages, various cuisines. And, we are such a multicultural society that it's very important for us to have a proper understanding and insight into what the culture is. In one of the mediation training programs, one of the mediators was, talking about his experience. He said in Orissa, the culture is to offer pan, and pan is something that you cannot say no to. So what happened? This mediator was told by his trainers that earlier, when he had undergone an earlier training, he had been told that you can't accept anything from the parties, especially when one party gives you something, you cannot accept it. So he politely refused. And what happened as a result of that was that the party who offered the pan walked out of the mediation because he felt humiliated and slighted by the fact that pan was refused. Okay, so you can imagine how impactful these cultural nuances can be when you're mediating a cross-cultural dispute. So people from different cultures, like for example, if you're mediating a dispute where one party is from Chennai and another party is from Delhi, we are talking about two diametrically opposed cultures. And, there are different standards for assessing goals, for how you communicate with each other. So all these things become very significant. Now, also it promotes a global collaboration because management of individuals from different cultures to reduce the misunderstanding and conflict and optimizing the communication and collaboration. Okay, so these are the advantages of having a cultural insight into who we are talking to. Okay, who are the parties before you, which culture they come from. So it becomes very important to have an assessment of that. Okay. Now, the second thing that these are as far as the cultural barriers are concerned. Now, the next barrier that we are going to be talking about is there is one very interesting thing I wanted to show you about the culture, uh, which is a picture actually of a Coca-Cola salesman. I'll just read out to you what it is about. So, a disappointed salesman of Coca-Cola returned from his assignment to Saudi Arabia. A friend asked, "Why weren't you successful with the Saudis?" The salesman explained, "When I got posted, I was very confident that I would make a good sales pitch. But I had a problem. I didn't know how to speak Arabic. So I planned to convey the message through three posters. The first poster was a man lying down in the desert, exhausted. Then he drinks Coca-Cola. And then the next poster is of the man running. So the first poster, a man lying in the hot desert, totally exhausted. Second poster, the man is drinking Coca-Cola. The third poster, a man is now totally refreshed. And then these posters were pasted all over the place. Terrific, that should have worked, said the friend. The hell it should have, said the salesman. No one told me they read from right to left. So what actually happened was the posters were put up from left to right, the man lying in the desert, drinking Coca-Cola and then running. But when the Arabs saw it, the Saudis saw it, they saw it as a man running, drinking Coca-Cola, and then collapsing. So you can imagine how, the culture, the language, all these can play a significant role in how people perceive situations or how they respond to communication or how they communicate with each other. Now we come to the cognitive biases. Basically, all of us have biases. Okay, not a single person can say that I'm free of bias. Because as we saw in one of the earlier slides that I showed you, that we receive 11 million bits of information. Our brain receives that, but it processes only 40 bits. So there's a lot of deletion and distortion that happens, and that depends on how we perceive the world, what kind of understanding of the world that we have, and what are our cultural beliefs, what are our belief systems, what are our traditions, what are our norms, what are the notions that we have of ourselves. All these go to create these biases. Now, as a result of this, what happens is because of the fact that we are not able to see the entire picture, as we saw the visually challenged persons trying to understand an elephant, we suffer from what is called as an assimilation bias. We only assimilate that information that fits into our unique paradigm. Okay, and we reject all other information. All other information gets deleted. And that is called as cognitive dissonance. We are not able to see anything that fits into our paradigm. Okay, so when we perceive something, we are looking at it only to the extent to which we are able to assimilate that, not the rest of it. And what happens as a result of which as a result of the assimilation bias and cognitive dissonance, we also have what is called as a false consensus bias. We believe that everybody believes the way we believe. So we believe that everyone should believe that way. And when we come across somebody who doesn't agree with us, we have this attributional bias where we attribute negative intent. We are suspicious of the person who doesn't fit into our concept of what they should be or how they should think or what they should believe in or how they should dress, okay, or what they should stand for. So these lead to a kind of, and this is something that mediators have to be very conscious of, because mediators can create the impasse because of their own biases if they're not cognizant of the fact that we are having these biases and we are allowing these biases to, dictate the way we are dealing with the parties. So that awareness becomes very important for the mediators themselves. Okay, so basically, these cognitive biases cause us to make erroneous assumptions. Okay, and we have the instinctively we categorize people and things, and we rely on certain mental shortcuts when making decisions. Okay, so when someone, for example, speaks in terms of what should be said or done, it is a clue that there is a cognitive bias or distortion that is influencing their perspective. Okay, and they may believe that their feelings about the situation are actually a reliable indicator of the reality, which may not be true. Okay, so the reality might be something different. Your perception might be something different. There's a very nice quote attributed to, I think, a well-known actor called Alan Alda. It says that your assumptions are your windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while or the light won't come in. Because what happens many times, the dust gathers because we are not looking at things, we are looking from the window of our own perceptions, of our own biases and prejudices. So as a result of this, we are not able to see the whole picture. So what happens as a result of that is we have a very distorted vision of the world. And it is not only the parties who are going through this process, who are suffering from this, it's also the mediator. So it becomes very important for the mediators to understand this, okay? Now, what are the emotional barriers that we can talk about, okay? There are many other cognitive biases, like we have anchoring bias, we have reactive devaluation, we have the endowment effect. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about all that, but basically what we need to understand when it comes to cognitive biases, the fact that there are 4 broad biases that we suffer from. All of us have these biases, okay? And many times I have found that, even I am operating from a position of bias, because when I listen to something, when I'm hearing something, I am using my own parameters to judge the situation. So, and that is something that, as long as you're conscious of it, as long as you're aware that this is happening to you, especially when you're sitting with the parties in a mediation, and you tend to lean towards one party, not towards the other party, simply because that party's point of view or that party's position or that party, the way the party looks or the culture the party comes from aligns with what you feel is the right thing. Okay, and instinctively what you're doing is you're creating an impasse because the other party is going to feel alienated because of that. Okay. So what happens is, emotions are very important in a mediation, because the emotional barriers that come up, because parties in a mediation, they have their own fixed narratives based on their own unique paradigms and perspectives. And these perspectives give rise to emotions. Now, something that is happening in one part of the world might upset party A a lot. Okay, party A might get deeply affected by what is happening. but party B may not see any value in that, or may not feel that this is something very bad or very good that's happening. Okay, so you have these different perceptions, the way you look at a situation. So you look at somebody suffering and you think that, oh, this person deserves it because this person comes from this particular class or caste or community or whatever. But the other person might feel very pained by that. And it's not only in these general situations, but the way we look at each other also. Because a small, some action or some gesture on the part of one person might, give rise to emotions in the other. Like I was mediating one case between a couple where the girl was so emotional that she would come into the mediation room and she would start crying. And what happened was when the husband would walk in, there was something that he was doing which I was not aware of, and I couldn't make it out, but she would flare up and she'll get angry and she'll tell me, look, see what he's doing. And I look at him and this guy will be sitting like a saint over there. So I had a private session with him. I said, I don't know what you're doing, but this seems to be provoking her. So how important is this for you to resolve? He said, no, sir, I want to get out of it. It's very important for me that we find some settlement here. I said, in that case, I have one request to make. I said, please stop doing what you're doing because you're provoking her and this is not going to lead us anywhere. Because many sessions took place in which all she would do is become emotional, start screaming, shouting. And finally, this guy realized that, he was actually irritating her by doing some gesture, which was so subtle that only she knew how to make out. Now, you can see how these things give rise to the emotions. So when we talk about emotions, it can be, anxiety, it can be distrust, it can be anger, it can be ego. So all these contribute to how, parties behave in the mediation process and also contribute to the situation of creating an impasse. Okay. Strategic barriers is the last one that I wanted to talk about. So, many times as a part of the negotiating strategy, people come up with some unrealistic proposals. They want to show the other party how strong they are. So there's a show of strength, and a lot of posturing happens. And there is a devaluation of offers that are made. Uh, Extremely high of demands are made from the other party. So these are all things that parties resort to in the negotiation because either they are very emotional, they are very angry with each other, or they feel that they need to establish or show a position of strength to the other party in order to get the other party to come into their, to accept their terms. So this again goes back to a lot of psychological aspects. Like when you look at, I don't know how many of you have heard of this Thomas Kilban conflict instrument, where they give a set of 30 questions. And if you do the assessment, you can Google it and find it. So when you do this assessment, you realize whether you are a type who is avoiding type. So somebody who walks away from the conflict, who refuses to acknowledge the conflict and to deal with it. You might be an accommodating type, where you are willing to accept anything that the other person says because you value the relationship more. You might be a compromising type, very impatient. You don't have the patience to sit and find a solution that works for both. You're not willing to explore alternatives. You're not willing to discuss how to add value or bring value to the table. So you are in a hurry to find a solution. The fourth type will be a competing type. Basically, people who are bullies by nature, high conflict personalities, who want everything their way and they're not willing to listen to the other party. And there might be people who are collaborating, okay, who are willing to sit and talk to each other and work out a solution that works for both. So what a mediator tries to do is identify what is the style of conflict that this person has. Is this person avoiding, accommodating, compromising, or competing, and try to bring them to a stage of collaboration? Now, some of the techniques that you can use, I'll just quickly rush through this. I know we are hard pressed for time. I'm really sorry about the connectivity issues that I was facing. It doesn't happen usually, but our technical guy is on leave. He's writing his law exams. So I don't have anybody to help me to find a solution for this. So that is another impasse that comes up because people take leave from the office for valid reasons. Of course, I'm not finding fault with them for that. But, basically, some of the techniques that Mr. Sriram Panchu has dealt with this in one of his books called Settle for More, where he suggests that you can involve parties in a brainstorming exercise where you think of multiple options that can be explored, and you then test these options and decide which is the best option. Because many times what happens is there is a fixed buy assumption on the part of the parties, and when you are discussing only one option, when you identify only one option and you discuss on that, there is every possibility that the negotiation might fail. So what you do is you generate multiple options. This is one of the techniques that is advocated also by Roger Fisher and William Ury in their very seminal work that's called Getting to Yes. And if you want to be a serious mediator, I think you have to read the book. So you brainstorm multiple options and then you test each of these options and shortlist the options and then finalize or narrow down on something that works for both parties. So that way, what happens is you have a lot of ideas on the table, and you have the option of the facility of discussing these different ideas. The other thing is, when you get into a sticky issue where parties are not able to move forward, you can always defer the issue for some time, because sometimes emotions might be high. Parties may not be ready to discuss the issue at that point of time. So you can, defer the issue. You can bring more value. It's called expanding the pie. So you try to add more value to the discussion. So you bring in something which is new. For example, let's say that you're going to buy a computer, okay, and you're negotiating the price with the seller. And the seller says, I'm sorry, the company has fixed the price and I cannot give you for a lesser price than that. But he doesn't want to lose the customer. So what the seller does is he says that, okay, sir, I will add this for you. I will give you a hard disk free of cost, okay? Or maybe a screen guard for your device, which I won't charge for. Or I will offer you an extended warranty. So you bring more value to the negotiating table to, make it good for the parties to accept, make it more acceptable to the parties. There's also a technique called redirecting, especially when parties are making unreasonable offers. So where they are taking a strategic approach to the negotiation and they want to create a strategic barrier. That is when you ask the parties that, okay, wonderful, you're making this offer. How would it look if you're made this offer? If you're in the other person's shoes, how would this look to you? So you're asking them to basically step into the shoes of the other person and have a look at it. And sometimes changing the messenger helps, because for example, if party A makes an offer and I carry it to party B saying that party A is offering this, there's something called reactive devaluation. The other party will flare up and say, how dare this offer? How dare he make this offer to me? And who's he to do this? And I'm rejecting it. So instead, I go and tell you that, how will this offer look like for you? Okay, so I'm changing the messenger. I'm not attributing that offer to the other party, but I'm putting it as a general proposition as to how that offer would look. So then, because it is not coming from the other party, this party may be more willing to explore that or listen to it, or maybe discuss it with lesser emotion than how they would react if the offer came directly from the other side. Then testing the Batna and Batna, basically what is called as reality testing. So that helps parties to understand where they stand, because parties may come under an assumption that they have a very good alternative. For example, a party may think, oh, I have a wonderful case in the court and the court is going to award me this. So is it really a best alternative for that party? So you ask a set of questions saying that, okay, how long is this going to take you? How much is it going to cost you? Is a bird in hand worth two in the bush? Basically, you're asking the party that question. So what would be the value of this if you get this after 10 years? And the most important question, especially in the Indian context, how are you going to realize the money? Let's say that the court is awarding you this. The most challenging part for you is to execute that and to recover the money. So there was this case I was mediating where the claim was 45 crores. And the other party was saying, I don't have that kind of money. And I can offer you a project that is worth about 5 crores. And this was actually referred by a sole arbitrator who was arbitrating the dispute. Okay, and the arbitrator felt that this should be mediated and it was referred to me. And the other party said that, hey, look, we can come down to 20 crores, but 5 crores is something totally unrealistic and we can't accept it. So they rejected the mediation, failed, they went back. And 3 months later, they called me and asked me that, can we revive that proposal? I said, why? They said, we have got an award for 4 crores, but we can't recover that because that guy is broke. So recovery becomes a very significant thing in a legal proceeding. So it's a bird in hand. Okay, so you may have 2 birds in the bush, but then the bird in hand is worth much more than that. Sometimes humor helps. Okay, and especially the safest humor is self-deprecating humor. You make fun of yourself. Okay, and crack jokes like oh, I love to talk, so please stop me when I go overboard or something like that. Okay, so different kinds of, but be very careful because again, culture becomes you cannot crack an inappropriate joke that would offend the parties. So it might sound to you to be an innocuous joke, but to the other party, it might be very offensive because there might be an element of sexism in that, or there might be something with culturally the party feels that, uh, you know, uh, they are humiliated or offended by whatever you say. So you have to be very careful. And keep emphasizing on the areas of agreement. Okay, so if parties are stuck on some issue, say that okay, A, B, C, D, we have agreed, and we have made some wonderful progress. So this is something that we need to work on. So let's work on it and see whether we can have a complete agreement. Okay. Mediation is all about the future. So focusing on the future is very helpful. So especially helping parties to understand how a conflict-free future would look like. So some of the important questions that you can ask is, how would you feel if this gets settled today? And for example, another question that we always talk about in our training is, ask the parties a question. Who would be the first person you will call if this gets settled today? So what you're doing is you're actually, planting the thought of a conflict-free future in the minds of the parties. So imagine, the party, when you ask this question, in all probability, the party might be imagining picking up the phone and calling a partner or a spouse or a sibling and say, it's over. Okay. So it creates that kind of a feeling. So many times this is very helpful in helping them to focus more on the future. So what we call as a conflict-free future, because they've been going through the conflict and it has caused a lot of, anguish and a lot of pain and suffering that they've been through, the very uncertainty of where they stand and the fact that, they're not able to get along with the other party. So all these things, when you put that thought of a conflict-free future in their minds, that motivates them to try and explore solutions. Okay, uh, take a break sometimes. Okay, because sometimes when the going gets very hard, it's always good to take a break because that gives parties time to reflect, to think back, to think about the progress that they have made so far, and then come back with the cooler heads. Okay, and lawyers, many times people feel that lawyers are not very good for mediation, but I have a contrary belief because I believe that lawyers are very helpful in a mediation because we always presume the worst about lawyers, but we are all lawyers essentially, and most of us are lawyers, and lawyers are not all that bad. And when they really believe that it is good for the client to settle, they always help us in exploring options. Okay, so in generating options, multiple options, lawyers can be very useful for that because parties trust the lawyers. And when the lawyer, evaluates an option and presents it, the parties are going to agree. And always try to build that team working relationship between the lawyers on both sides so that both realize the importance of collaborating and finding solutions for their clients. So throughout the process, the mediator has to try and create that collaborative environment between the parties. And sometimes, threats work. So especially this threat should not be an empty threat, but it should be made only when you are very confident the parties are totally invested in the mediation process. So when supposing they reach an impasse situation and you tell them, look, do you think we should stop this mediation because we are not making any progress so far. So do you think I should terminate the mediation? Now this, motivates them to work a little more towards finding a resolution. And it works very effectively many times. And actually, I have tried it and it has worked for me. But I do it very carefully. I never give up in a mediation, but it's always good to sometimes say that, how do you think we are progressing? We don't seem to be making any progress. So what do we do now? So do you think you would like to go back to the court, or would you like to explore any other alternative methods? And if you put this across and parties really have made progress and they have, on any particular issue, if they are stuck, it motivates them to work a little more and come up with some solution. So these are all some of the basic techniques that we can use. I'll just stop here, okay? And open up the floor for questions. I'm really sorry about the
No,
time
no,
that has been.
no problem, sir. Thank you, sir, for such an insightful and thought-provoking session. I speak for everyone who's present here today that your experience and practical wisdom brought a much-needed clarity on how mediators can effectively recognize, manage, and resolve the deadlock, sir, in the mediation process. Over to the questions, sir, that have been asked. I'll start from the last ones first so that the continuity of the lecture is maintained, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, Joseph Kanjangwe asks that is an impasse in mediation predictable? How to recognize the warning signs and avoid it?
No, many times it might be predictable because you know what the attitude of the parties is. Okay, there are many factors that will indicate that we are going to be reaching an impasse. Sometimes it might be the body language, the tone of voice of the parties, or you may find that the parties are very sensitive to a particular issue and there is going to be a likelihood of an impasse. So that is where the mediator has to be very observant of the parties, okay, and see, many times, the facial expressions, all these things indicate where we stand, okay, and how the parties are viewing the relationship. So it's important to focus on that. And it's always helpful to have a private session with the parties when you feel that a party is uncomfortable in a particular situation or is going to be creating some difficulty. Always have a private session with the parties. And that's private sessions are a very powerful tool. So you can have a private session and say that, okay, I felt that I felt that you were a little uncomfortable when this point was being discussed. So can you help me to understand what is affecting you in this? So asking them gives them a lot of confidence, and the fact that the mediator is perceptive enough to understand their emotions. So that helps parties to, really discuss freely with the mediator. And then you can, see how you structure the process to be able to deal with that sense or whatever misgivings the parties may have or whatever discomfort that they are experiencing.
So, so Prerna Sharma asks, sir, coming from a psychology background and
Mm.
now practicing law, I have noticed that cognitive biases, whether confirmation bias, attribution bias, or halo effect, can sometimes influence even judges or arbitrators,
Yes.
despite the structure and codification in those processes.
Yeah.
Given that mediation is far more flexible and non binding, how do we realistically guard against such biases in mediators, especially when the process relies so much on their personal perception and intuition?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, because nobody calls a judge or an arbitrator to account for the biases that they hold, and that gets reflected in the judgments also many times, okay, in the awards also. So, but there's no way that you can hold them to account except to challenge the findings in a higher court or whatever options that you have, legal options. In a mediation, see, the training of the mediator involves a significant part of the psychological aspects of how in a conflict people are behaving and what are the biases, because this is something that each mediator needs to work on. Okay, because recognizing the bias is the most important. And these biases are deep down in your subconscious. You may not even be realizing that you're working with a bias. Okay, you're operating on a bias. So developing that awareness is very important. And that's something that each one has to work on. There cannot be any, standard which can be uniform standard that can be prescribed for everybody, because biases vary with each person, with the culture, with your beliefs, with your notions, with how your own concept of yourself. All these things vary a lot. So it's something very important for first of all, acknowledging that I'm not free of bias. Okay, that's very important. So if a mediator tells herself that, oh, I'm free of all biases, I'm absolutely neutral. No, you're not neutral. In a mediation, neutrality is a myth. Okay, in any circumstances, neutrality is a myth because you have a point of view. Okay, you have an opinion, you have a perspective, and those perspectives are going to, those feelings are going to create emotions in you. Okay, you may automatically be drawn towards one party and feel alienated from the other party because of the way the whole situation is. Okay, what the parties are talking about. Just one example I'll give you. In one mediation I was doing, uh, I felt like just getting up and punching the husband in the face because he was saying all the, he was pushing all the wrong buttons. But then I just stopped the mediation. I said, let's take a break. And I said, let's meet after a couple of days. I went back, I thought about it. I realized that, okay, I don't like this guy. Okay. So once I understood that, then I thought to myself, should I put a stop to this mediation? Or will I be able to deal with it without being biased towards this guy? So it took me 2 or 3 days to come to the conclusion that, yes, I can proceed with the mediation, notwithstanding the fact that I don't like this guy. I can still be impartial to him. Okay. So what we call as partiality in the mediation context. We don't talk about neutrality, we talk about omnipartiality. So I decided that, okay, he comes from a different paradigm. He comes from a cultural background, which makes him behave the way he behaves. So as long as I can understand that and work around it, I can work with that. I'm okay with doing the mediation. So then we restarted the mediation and I was able to deal with it in a much better way. Okay. So it's
Sir.
important to recognize. Yeah, sorry. Go
So
ahead.
the next question would be, sir, sometimes people carry their past trauma into mediation,
Yeah.
especially in sensitive disputes. How can mediators handle such deep emotions to prevent those feelings from causing a deadlock?
Okay, once again, a very good question. Now, here again, see, you don't have a magic wand that you can wave and just make all that pain disappear. It may just not be possible. And that's where I think it becomes more important to focus on the future. Okay, so help them to recognize how much pain this conflict has caused them, listening to them and acknowledging their pain and the feelings that they're going through without judging them or without telling them they're right or wrong. Becomes very important. Okay. And then focusing them on a conflict-free future. Okay. So you can always tell them that, okay, how is this helping you? How are you feeling now? Okay. How do you think you will feel if this gets resolved? So what is the most important thing for you? So these are some of the good questions that you can put to the parties to make them look at a conflict-free future. Because you may not be able to, sometimes the listening itself can be cathartic for the parties. Okay. So just by simply listening to them, you may be helping them to deal with their own emotions and feelings. So it is very helpful to listen without judging, without advising, without analyzing, without breaking down, or stopping them from expressing the feelings. So that itself can be a very cathartic experience for them and helps them on their own to deal with those emotions and then focusing on a conflict-free future.
So one very detailed question that was asked when,
Mhm.
sir, you had to log out, sir, because of the power cut, sir, was
Okay.
from Swati Setia, sir. How to
Mm.
deal with the kind of impasse, sir, recently in a mediation at the stage of opening statement, which is to be conducted through VC, while one party was present with his counsel on VC, the
Mm.
other party, which is an MNC, was represented by three counsels.
Mm.
Counsel representing the MNC stated that they would represent and discuss the matter in mediation, which is their general practice, and no authorized representative will join. The other party therefore said that this is disrespectful to him, and if no one from MNC is present to discuss the matter, he will also not participate and will then be represented through his lawyer. As this is a party centric process, what are the possible ways of handling the situation, sir?
Well, see, here the challenge is more of a procedural kind that gives rise to a perception that of disrespect from the other party. because that party is expecting somebody who's a decision maker from the other side to come here and be a part of the process. Okay, because basically it's a party-centric process. Now, this is something that you can discuss with both sides and see if the other side can be convinced to bring whoever is the person having due authority to take decisions on behalf of the company and ask that person to be present in the course of the discussions. Okay, or perhaps the other party can maybe you can discuss with the other party and help the other party to understand that it is not a sign of disrespect, but it is simply that that is how the structure works. Okay, so the lawyers are empowered.
So there are lot.
Sorry?
No, sir, please go on, sir.
No, somebody said something. So I think that's the only way, because basically, see, when you're entering in the private mediation context, before you start the mediation itself, there is a stage called convening where you have these discussions with the parties as to who's going to represent, who has the authority to settle, what kind of authorization is going to be given, and who should be representing the party there in the mediation process. So if all this is sorted out in advance, then you avoid this situation from coming up. So the parties can proceed with the mediation only if they agree to all these things. Okay. So that is one way to avoid that kind of an impasse, by saying that by having the clarity and a clear-cut agreement to mediate can be entered into, where everything will be specified, all the aspects of the mediation, the venue, who's going to represent, what will be the mediator's fee. Okay, all these things can be agreed upon through an agreement to mediate, which would prevent such a conflict from arising when the actual mediation starts.
So last question, sir, because we'll have to wrap up considering the time constraints.
Yeah, yeah.
So what role can technology play in helping parties overcome impasse? And what are some potential benefits or drawbacks of technology in mediation, sir? Himanshu Chakravarti has asked this question, sir.
Okay, see, technology can be utilized very effectively. Okay, because see, one thing is, for example, we are having this Zoom meeting and we are sitting in different parts of the country and from different parts of the world. We are able to connect and communicate, avoiding the cost of travel, avoiding the cost of going from one place to the other. We are saving so much of time. So basically, technology is time and space agnostic. So it makes it very convenient for people to meet and to have sessions and to have these discussions together. So that is one of the biggest advantages of technology. Now, the only challenge there is that we are not physically present. We are not able to see each other. Okay, I'm able to see a few faces of those who have their cameras on. Those who have their cameras off, I don't know how they look, who they are, where they come from. Okay, I don't know anything about them, right? So now it gives a sense of discomfort. Okay, so it makes you feel. I'm not feeling uncomfortable now because I know this is a big group and I can't expect everybody to have their cameras on. But generally, in the mediation context, it's very important that people follow certain etiquette. Okay, so certain rules are there for online meetings where you keep your camera on, the way you position your camera, the lighting that you have. No, and more, the focus is more on your facial expressions and your tone of voice rather than the rest of the body. So it limits the scope for understanding the body language, okay, from assessing what the parties are going through or what exactly they're doing. The second disadvantage is the confidentiality aspect, because you really don't know who's sitting over there, who's listening in, or who's recording. So, many times you have to resort to private sessions more because you don't want the breach of confidentiality to happen in a joint session. But when you're forced to have a joint session, you have to make sure that only the concerned parties are there and there's no recording of that. So one way of doing that is I always tell the parties that, look, this is actually your problem that we are trying to sort out. And it is your information and it is up to you to keep it confidential. Okay, I trust you and I leave it to you to respect the confidentiality. And touch wood, I haven't come across any case so far where this confidentiality has been breached. So that is the second point that we need to keep in mind. Okay, and then of course, the third aspect is what we face today. The technology created an impasse today where I was thrown out of the meeting and I couldn't rejoin for some time because I didn't have a good connection here. And dependence on the technical teams, and then, the challenges of technology itself. So this is something that you always face.
Sir, for a session that you said would be very boring, the consensus on the chat box is that this is the most interesting and informative session, sir. And on behalf of Nivaran, CLA, and SIMC, I extend my heartfelt gratitude, sir, for sharing your time and expertise with us.
Thank you.
Clarity with which you unpacked, sir, such a complex aspect of mediation and the practical insights that you provided were incredibly valuable, sir. And your approach definitely sparked an engaging discussion, reflection, and a renewed sense of purpose, sir, in our mediation practice. We all leave today's session, sir, not just with the knowledge, but with deeper appreciation for the dedicated art of moving forward when things seem stuck, sir. Sir, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank everyone at Nivaran for organizing the summer school for the 6th year in a row and for the opportunity to meet today. I would also like to thank our technical team, Rahul, Rohit, and Keshav, who have worked tirelessly to ensure a seamless experience for us all. The recordings, as mentioned earlier, will be available on YouTube after the conclusion of the summer school on the 11th of August. Before we close for the day, I would like to invite you all for a session tomorrow, wherein our guest speaker for the day, Mr. Brian Spears, Senior Mediator and Trainer, former President, CLA Belfast, Northern Ireland, will be speaking on ethics, confidentiality, neutrality, and self-determination in a session hosted by Ms. Mandakini Sharma, Mediator and Advocate, Supreme Court of India. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow and in our future sessions. Thank you and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Asta. One more thing is, because I could not use the PPT here to show, what I will do is I'll share the PDF version of it with Sultan, and perhaps you can share
You
it
can put it here in the chat. I think the chat will be closed, so you can put it in. There's a group already for the presentations. So you can send it to Sultan, and Sultan
I'll share it to us. Yeah.
So
thank
that
you,
would be
sir.
really helpful, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience and kind listening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jawad. Nice.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye-bye.